gentlemen. Good morning. Okay. I welcome you all to the 15th Renewable Energy India Expo. I hope you all are doing really great. We had a power-packed session yesterday. And starting off with the first session of today, we have long-duration battery storage, opportunities for US and India collaboration. The main objective of this technical session will be to bring out perspective on collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, may I please request our delegates, our esteemed speakers to please kindly join us here on the dais. We have Mr. Mahmood Jardane, Energy Attaché, US Embassy, New Delhi. A big hand for him, ladies and gentlemen. So please join us here on the stage. The next speaker we have, Dr. Kilian McKenna, Research Engineer, National Renewable Energy Laboratories. Kindly join us here on the stage, sir. I would now like to request Dr. Rahul Walvakar, President, IESA, MD, CES, India. Please give him a big round of applause. I would now like to request Ms. Durra El-Maki, Commercial Officer, US Commercial Service. A big hand for her, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be having a virtual message from Dr. Imre Gyuk, Energy Storage Research, US Department of Energy. And we'll be having a virtual message from Mr. Matt Harper, Chief Commercial Officer in Invinity Energy Systems. I would now like to request to join us here on the dais, Mr. Yashwant Mahadevan, Vice President and Middle East Region, IEOS Energy Enterprises. Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for him. With this, I would like to request Mr. Mahmood Jardane to kindly begin with the first session. And before that, can we have a big round of applause for all the esteemed speakers, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much.
Potential for collaboration between the United States and India under our bilateral strategic clean energy partnership to advance battery storage. The US and India are pursuing similar goals of accelerating the transition to renewable energy in their respective economies. Battery storage is key to achievement of these goals. We see similar endeavors by both governments to incentivize the ecosystem for battery storage advancements. Under Energy Earthshots initiative, the US Department of Energy launched the long-duration storage shot, establishing a target to reduce the cost of grid-scale energy storage by 90% for a system that delivered 10+ hours of duration within the next decade. The Indian government has also announced plans and more recently tenders to implement grid-scale battery systems to provide support for the grid as more and more renewable energy gets added to it. At DOE, we are actively working with the Government of India counterparts to determine areas of mutual interest for collaboration and hope to make an announcement in the near future, maybe as soon as October 7. In this session, we have a panel comprising policymakers, researchers, and industry leaders, and we look forward to their insights. We will start with Dr. Imre Gyuk, the Department of Energy Director for Energy Storage Research, and an internationally recognized leader in this field. With his team at the Department of Energy in Washington, Dr. Imre is working to develop wide portfolios of storage technologies for a broad spectrum of applications. We will now have a recorded presentation from Dr. Imre covering the US government perspective.
Storage Research Program at the Department of Energy, Office of Electricity. And today I would like to talk about grid decarbonization and how important medium and long duration energy storage is so we can get it. We start by observing that global climate change is real. Last year in the United States, Hurricane Ida devastated the East Coast and inundated New York City. At the same time, on the West Coast, there was a drought worse than any in the last 400 years. And the same year, there was a winter storm in Texas that brought outages to most of the state, and there were uncontrolled wildfires in the mountains of Colorado and California and other places. Floods and droughts, but also sea level rise, coastal erosion, reduced crop yield, wildfires, and health impacts. Global warming has emerged as a paramount issue, and it's worldwide. We are all in this together. We have been burning coal, oil, and natural gas for our electric grid, for transportation, and for industry. And this has increased carbon dioxide levels to twice the highest levels in 800,000 years. And that is bad. We must decarbonize. We must change to renewable energy. And we have to do it soon. In fact, right away. We have to keep in mind that all the sectors are coupled. Transportation, building systems, agriculture, and manufacturing traditionally rely on electricity and on fossil fuel. And electricity, again, relies on renewables and on fossil fuel. Well, if we are going to decarbonize, all of the fossil fuel has to go, and all the four sectors will rely on electricity and on renewable electricity at that. So renewable electricity, however, has a problem. As we reduce fossil fuel more and more, the generation will become more and more variable. But at the same time, the load also becomes more variable as we include the electrified sectors and various ways of having distributed generation. So between variable generation and variable load, we need a buffer. And that buffer is energy storage. So renewable energy requires energy storage. We cannot do without it. Storage, in fact, of various durations will be needed: short, medium, and long duration. The 15-minute to 4 hours region is mainly for smoothing renewables and for stabilizing the grid. And lithium-ion is doing a very good job at that. 4 to 12 hours is medium duration storage, and that is basically our PV storage having to last throughout the night. And for that, lithium-ion batteries are not as suitable, and we will have to go to flow batteries and other technologies. When we get to long duration storage, 12 hours to 3 days, that's our bad weather backup, we will have to go to things like thermal and gravity storage and chemical storage. And we are going to need an awful lot of this, 1,200 to 2,300 gigawatt hours of energy storage. And that's an underestimate. We have done well with short duration energy storage and lithium-ion technology. We use it for frequency regulation, smoothing renewables, demand charge reduction, substation upgrade deferral, and many others. We have created evaluation and planning tools like Quest of Sandia and others by EPRI and other institutions. And we have developed viable business models which will provide a positive return. And as a result, the growth of energy storage has been a resounding success as it increases exponentially and is expected to do so in the future. Many states have established regulatory structure to support energy storage, but then again, many have not. So the job is not entirely done. Lithium-ion is the incumbent technology, but it does have issues. There are sourcing issues. There are only a few countries that produce lithium-ion, and it's even worse with cobalt and other things that go into batteries. But there are also ecological and sociological issues. There are safety issues. The occasional fire definitely occurs. And there are reliability issues because inherently lithium ion batteries degrade over time. And the reuse, recycling, or disposal issue has not been solved, even though there are such technologies available. But it has to be cost effective and convenient. So, going to medium duration storage, 4 to 12 hours, we are looking towards flow batteries, zinc, iron, sodium ion. It's going to be the next wave. To achieve real sustainability, we would ultimately like to have a circular technology based on earth abundant and inexpensive materials. The supply chain and the waste stream must be part of the design. And now we go to long duration storage, 12 hours to 3 days. This is to back up for bad weather over 3 days. And we will have to use mechanical storage, thermal, chemical storage, things like liquid air or molten aluminum. Long duration energy storage is essential for the development of a decarbonized, reliable grid. But it will require new technology, new business cases, and new regulatory frameworks, and a lot of funding for research, for development, and for deployment. Now, lucky for us, the California Energy Commission has already advanced on this topic, and they have a number of projects going on. You will see a batch of projects there that have an energy of 400 kilowatt, but go for 10 hours. We see vanadium redox, zinc hybrid, and flywheels. Then we see another batch that has less energy and also 10 hours. Somewhat the same technologies, vanadium redox, but also aquifer pumped hydro. And then we go to 10 kilowatt and 100 hours. So that is more ambitious on a time scale. And then not awarded yet, but in development are grants that are megawatt size, 6 to 8 megawatts. And again, we see redox flow batteries and zinc hybrid and iron air. DOE Sandia will support these CEC projects through a joint memorandum of understanding. We will be helping with technical review of proposals, with analysis of operational data, with fire and safety issues, and with support of system commissioning. So we will be very closely linked with these projects as they evolve. At DOE itself, we have a fairly big chunk of projects enabled by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So far, no projects, but the structure is there. First of all, there is a whole collection of projects that may involve storage, but not necessarily so. Resilience for utilities, states and tribes, and remote areas. Grid modernization, advanced manufacturing, and clean energy projects on mine lands. It would appear that energy storage will play a strong role in all of those. Now, when it comes to specific storage demonstrations and long duration storage demonstrations, those will be in the Office of Electricity. To break it down a little bit more, there are 355 million for two groups of projects. One is validation, the demo projects for first of a kind, long duration energy storage, utility scale. And then there is piloting, pilot grants to lower the barriers to storage deployment. And then there is a chunk of 150 million for demonstrations, a demo initiative for innovative early stage long duration storage. And finally, there's resilience. This is a joint program for storage demonstrations on DOE and DoD facilities. So we need much more energy storage, and we need it bigger and safer, less expensive and longer in duration. And we need to apply it in equitable ways. We have to reach all populations. If we don't do this, we are in very deep trouble. Thank you. Hello, I'm Imre Dyuk, and I direct the Energy Storage Research Program at the Department of Energy, Office of Electricity. And today I would like to talk about grid decarbonization.
Okay, great. Thanks to Dr. Imre for giving us insight about what's happening in the US. But as we noticed, while the US, a lot of work is being done at the federal level, much of the work is being done at the subnational level and the important role of industry. Is that okay? With this, I would like to invite Dr. Killian McKenna from the US Department of Energy National Renewable Energy Laboratory. He's with us here from Colorado. Dr. Killian has led projects on smart inverters, distributed energy resources, and solar PV integration, lithium-ion and flow battery energy storage, demand-side management, customer modeling, and Volt VR optimization. We look forward to Dr. McKenna's perspective on long-term duration storage technology options. Killian?
Oops. Thank you very much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Let me get my HDMI in here and bring up this presentation. Great. Thank you so much all for coming to this session. I'm really encouraged to see the interest in the room on this topic. So I'm going to be talking about long-duration storage, specifically from the perspective of NREL. There's a lot of credit to my fellow researchers who have listed on screen here. This is definitely not just my work. This is a lot of people who are working at the National Lab on this. So NREL at a glance is it's the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. It's a national lab of the US Department of Energy, and we focus on clean energy technologies, specifically renewables, wind and solar. NREL started off as a solar lab, and we've gotten into energy storage because it's really this tool that we need to integrate large amounts of renewable energy onto the grid. At NREL, we have around almost 3,000 staff working on renewables, energy efficiency, wind, solar, from the bulk system to the distribution. We've got a lot of partnerships, more than 900 worldwide. This week I was here in India working with a lot of the DISCOMs on DER integration. It's a pleasure to be here at this session this morning as well. So as outlined already, there's a lot of need for energy storage, but there are multiple use cases here. So energy arbitrage is one of the ones that has already been utilized for storage. When we had the kind of oil crisis in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of pumped hydro energy storage built to try to arbitrage, to try bring down peak prices. And we're seeing that need in many places around the world currently with very high oil and gas prices. And that's to try reduce the need for peaking generation. So a lot of those units as pumped hydro that were built back then have been used right now for renewables integration because they provide all of that flexibility. And that gets to the renewables part. Wind and solar are inflexible resources. They can't be dispatched. And when we get to higher levels of renewable energy to try reduce curtailment and also to try reduce some of the thermal limits on inflexible plant, such as coal and nuclear, we start to need some more system flexibility. And that can come from a lot of different places. It can come from the demand side, it can come from gas, it could come from storage. But as we start to decarbonize, we're going to have to reduce our reliance on gas in particular, and that's where energy storage really comes in. There's another aspect here on upgrade deferrals. We're seeing with renewables that we need a massive investment on the grid, even when we're looking at say, the electrification of transport and heating, with the massive kind of forecast growth of EVs, that there's a potential to use energy storage to shift when we can use the energy produced by renewables. On the resiliency side, as already outlined, we're having an increasing amount of extreme weather events that is taking out parts of the grid, and storage can be a means to provide a networked microgrid. It can provide behind-the-meter resilience. So that's another aspect that storage can be used for. For storage duration, for most of the near-term applications that we're seeing on the grid, diurnal storage or storage of around 4 hours, we're seeing to be sufficient. But when we get to very high renewable deployment and resiliency application, that's when we need long-duration storage. So that's in the order of 10 to 100 hours. And that's going to have an increasing role to play. And in order to have that long-duration storage, we need to start working on those technologies now. A lot of them are still very nascent. They've got a low technology readiness level. So we need to start investing in those now if we want those there in 10 years' time when we're approaching 70, 80%, 90% of our energy generation coming from renewables. And then further out, seasonal storage might also start to come into the picture. There's a lot of systems where you have low coincidence of renewable energy production and demand, such as those who are winter peaking systems and don't have solar resources during the winter. Some systems are fortunate, they might have a lot of wind generation during the winter, but we're starting to see those seasonal challenges with renewables as well. So if we really want to decarbonize to 100%, we're going to need seasonal storage as well to try store renewables cross seasons for demand. And really to illustrate that, this graph is enormously helpful. What you're looking up at the top is the net load. So that's the load, all of your normal electricity demand, plus wind and solar. And we're looking at essentially 3 forms of storage here. The first is that short duration storage. So that's when you have an excess of renewables during certain times of the day, when we've got a lot of wind, a lot of solar, but we don't have the demand there to satisfy, to balance. And we could start to use short duration storage to shift that. Looking at long duration storage, that's when we're in the order of multiple days, or kind of that 10 to 100 hour period. So this is kind of intraday storage. And that can really result in the mismatch between, okay, we've had a couple of days of really high wind, and then we've really backed off when we don't have renewables there, or we have a period of a lot of overcast weather and we don't have solar there. That's where this kind of intraday or kind of multi-day storage could be useful. And we already talked about seasonal storage. So there's not one technology that's going to provide the solution for all of these 3 forms of storage. It's going to be a multi-technology solution. There isn't one forerunner out there that's going to solve all our problems. So in this kind of long duration, looking at this 10 hours out, there are multiple technologies at play. Pumped storage is very well established, but it has very high capital costs. There's environmental concerns there as well. But there's potential innovations to avoid trying to underground all of those powerhouses. With pumped storage, all of those generation rooms are deep under earth, and that's very expensive to achieve. So we're looking at solutions for having those kind of subsurface. On the electrochemical side, lithium-ion, the advances keep continuing. Lithium-ion prices keep dropping around 60 to 70% in a decade period on a rolling basis. But there's huge diversity in the anodes and cathodes and electrolytes that we're developing for lithium-ion. And then we're also looking at beyond lithium applications. So looking at sodium, aluminium, calcium, and zinc are being explored on the battery side. Some of those are more readily available in terms of their chemistry, but they don't have the same energy density. There's also a competition with transportation here. Should we be prioritizing lithium for power systems or transportation? On the electrochemical side, flow batteries is another one that has been around for a number of decades now with vanadium redox, but vanadium prices are very volatile, making it an expensive form of energy storage. So there's zinc and bromide and other solutions being explored on the flow battery side, and also organics are being explored. So if you look at flow batteries right now, I could probably list you 50 different types of flow batteries that are being developed, and any of those could have a breakthrough and be a forerunner. Hydrogen, there's probably going to be other sessions at this conference talking about hydrogen, but that's going to be a big player here because of the multi-industry purposes, right? So hydrogen could be for transportation, it could be for fertilizers, it could be for heating, it could be for metals and refining, and you can use the gas infrastructure for some of that as well. So there's potentially large applications in seasonal energy storage on the hydrogen side. Compressed air energy storage, that has actually been in commercial development. There's compressed air energy storage units in Europe and in the US. And they're capable of storing a lot of energy with air at high pressure. That's where if you have available salt caverns, that could be a really good form of energy storage to use. But there's challenges on the waste heat side. When you're compressing air, you generate heat, and you have to try capture and store that energy to improve the efficiency of compressed air energy storage. Liquid air energy storage is similar, but it's going to even high pressure, looking at air in liquid form. And there are small-scale demonstration projects ongoing on that side. Another form is thermal energy storage that you could spend multiple hours discussing the amount of different forms of thermal energy storage. So that's insensible. So if you think of, say, storage heaters were actually used in Europe before, which is essentially just heating up hot bricks to a high temperature, you could use that for end uses as well, which could decouple end use from the electricity side. Latent heat is being used in concentrated solar power applications, where you have a phase change either from a solid to a liquid or a liquid to a gas, and then you have thermochemical heat transfer, which is being explored as well. Another interesting one is gravity, which is essentially just using potential energy. So you elevate something at a height, you release it to generate electricity, you raise it when you're motoring, and there's actually some interesting applications there. There's commercial companies in the US looking at using old oil wells and gas wells because you have these deep bores into the earth. So you could be using those to store large amounts of potential energy and have motors and generators to capture that power. So what you're looking at on the graph on the bottom left-hand side is the cost of these on a duration and then also on a kilowatt basis. So we're looking at the installed capacity dollars per kilowatt and the duration. So what you're seeing for lithium is that it's not scaling too well, but there's these potential technologies down the bottom right-hand corner of that graph, such as hydrogen, compressed air energy storage, and pump storage, which are doing quite well. But there's potentially a lot of innovations on the electrochemical side that could compete here. I'm going to skip this slide because I've covered a lot of this already. At NREL, we have this facility called the Advanced Research on Integrated Energy Systems. This is where we're testing multi-megawatt scale energy storage in these large microgrid settings, because we are going to need to de-risk these technologies from the lab scale to the bench scale to a microgrid scale before we can roll these out. So we're working on those solutions at NREL. So in summary, long-duration storage is useful for decarbonizing the last 10 to 20% of the energy sector. We're going to have to start developing these technologies now in order to have them when we're getting to those levels of renewable energy integration. There's many, many forms of long-duration storage under development. None of them are quite cost competitive yet, but there's a lot of innovations being made. And long duration may be tied in with other use cases, such as looking at thermal and end use, looking at transportation, heating, and industrial processes. So in take home, if you're working on the long duration storage space, if you're interested in this research, there's a lot of work to be done. And we're looking forward to collaborating with people in India and around the world on trying to solve this problem. So please do talk to us, and we're looking forward to working with everyone on this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna, for your insights. Next, we arrive now at the industry perspective. We have with us Dr. Rahul Walwalkar, founder and president of the India Solar Energy Storage Alliance. Dr. Walwalkar is known for us as a thought leader in the areas of energy storage, renewables, demand response, electric vehicles, and smart technologies. Given his keen understanding of both the US and Indian energy storage developments, we see Dr. Walwalkar insights on potential for industries on both sides to collaborate. Dr. Walwalkar.
Thank you very much, MJ, and all the participants. I thought today I will not do a presentation. I think most of you have seen me talk about and seen some of the analysis what we at Customized Energy Solutions and IESA has done. So I just thought I'll try to talk more about at a high level what are the opportunities in India, as well as some of the discussion around long duration, how it has been evolving over the years. So just to give some of you background, I started working on energy storage back in 2004 where we partnered with Electric Power Research Institute in US to look at how some of the emerging energy storage technologies will fit into electricity markets. And in fact, the first set of technologies which were looked at were mostly medium and long duration storage technologies. So we looked at flow batteries, vanadium redox, zinc bromide, sodium sulfur, which was sort of a 6 to 8 hour kind of a storage, and then flywheels as the only technology for short duration. This was before lithium ion technologies were considered commercially viable technologies for any grid applications. Going forward, around 2006, 2008, a lot of discussions were happening around the policy changes around ancillary services. And when Federal Electricity Regulatory Commission changed the market rules around opening up ancillary markets for energy storage, suddenly there was a focus of the industry shifted towards the shorter duration, because there was a opportunity for deploy maybe just 30-minute or below 1 hour kind of a storage and earn significant amount of money rather than looking at energy storage just as a way for energy arbitrage or just for firming. Because in most of the cases, the kind of differences which are available in on-peak and off-peak, it is not sufficient to invest into technologies like storage technologies just for sake of energy arbitrage. The other challenges which happens is many times as you start looking at longer duration energy storage, the utilization starts coming down because the number of days in which you need really to use the full long duration storage, those numbers are less, and that's where some of the business modeling and financing aspects come into. And that's where again, working on the policy and market structure is very important, because for long duration energy storage to work, you need to have some kind of a capacity value, because you cannot justify building such large projects purely on basis of just energy arbitrage opportunities which will come in. And particularly in the Indian context, right now there is a concern which I hope CERC will address in near future, is that anytime in the market there has been price spikes have happened, the regulators have intervened and capped the market prices. Now that sends a horrible signal to the investors. So that's something I think I'm hoping that through the partnership between US and India, we can have a better dialogue in terms of looking at the different market structures. And although in a short term, it may seem criminal to some of the bureaucrats or policymakers that some companies are making profit, if you stop sending these price signals, then that is not going to create an inducive environment for supporting a long duration storage or any other technologies. Then we end up getting in a situation where only we are investing in some peaker plants in form of thermal generation, because there is existing market structure where they get their fixed cost covered under a separate contract, and then the marginal cost is only the fuel cost, and that seems to be a cheaper solution. But if you really start around the world stories where you see how the existing thermal plants are starting to get decommissioned and other, because anything with peaker and intermediate thermal technologies, right now energy storage technologies are more cost effective than those systems. So I think in terms of the technology development, we are way on track. And again, you'll hear from Yeshwant about what they are doing. There are multiple technologies and options available, but this is not just a technological problem. We are not waiting for some miracle technology to arrive and solve problem for it. I think we need to work on it both from the policy side, we need to work on the business side, financing side, and create the right structures. And in many of the cases, these structures already exist in other industries. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, or we don't need another 2-3 years of research studies to try to figure out what needs to be done. A lot of work has happened. For example, Killen mentioned about his colleague Paul Denholm. So Paul Denholm and me, we had worked back in 2006, 2010 in looking into compressed air energy storage and how it can, how these projects can be scaled up. Unfortunately, in US, with the sort of a lot of abundant availability of the cheap natural gas with shale gas, everyone was thinking that, oh, cheap natural gas will actually help compressed air energy storage, because you also use natural gas as a feedstock for compressed air energy storage. But it is not only about that one technology, right? The cheap natural gas prices ended up suppressing the peak prices on the electricity market, and the times when we used to see $100, $150 peak prices in the market, suddenly we entered a phase where the peak prices were $50, $60. So that arbitrage opportunity also went down, and that affected possibility of financing some of these compressed air or similar energy storage projects. So this is something which I would again urge all the companies who are working on the technologies that don't just try to look at that you are trying to develop a perfect box, and if you achieve certain technical parameters, everything is going to be great. This is a quite complex challenge, and you need to start looking into the regulatory frameworks, the business models, business case, and some of the aspects in terms of what is the definition of long duration itself. It has changed over the last 15 years. Earlier, 4 hour was even considered as a long duration, and now then it shifted to 6, 8. Now we saw Kilen talk about 10 hour and above as a long duration energy storage. So these definitions are also a little bit fluid, and they will change. Another aspect I would just mention is that do not underestimate lithium-ion batteries. I think it is very easy, and we have done it multiple times, where we have seen it many times. Companies felt, oh, lithium-ion will be only successful for applications which is 1 hour or less. Then it went to 2 hour or less. Then now for 4 hour, it has become a default to go for lithium-ion batteries. And even most recently, especially in US, there are certain 6 to 8 hour tenders which were sort of open for all technologies. They have been won by lithium-ion technologies. So the amount of investment which is going into scaling up of lithium-ion technologies, as well as the amount of R&D and work which is going, there are multiple pathways where lithium-ion batteries can also sort of break the $50 barrier at the cell level, although not at a system level. So these things are something where you need to, as a technology developer, keep on looking at how other technologies and competitors are also evolving, and not just assume that, okay, lithium-ion batteries or some other technologies are at some stage, and okay, I have 5 years to beat that, because in 5 years, there is going to be improvement in those technologies as well. So I think with that, I'd just like to say that in India, with the kind of regulatory and the policy direction government has taken, where we are not limiting ourselves to just 100 gigawatt solar. Already government has set a roadmap for 500 gigawatt non-fossil fuel generation, in which it is expected that solar will be at least 300 plus gigawatt. Storage is going to be definitely required. And unfortunately, Mr. Ghanashyam Prasad, sir, could not join us today, but he at Ministry of Power and now at CEA have done a lot of groundwork already. Earlier in May, on the 10th anniversary of India Energy Storage Alliance, IESA has released the India Stationary Energy Storage Vision document. I have few copies with me, so if someone is interested, you can reach out to me, or you can download it from the IESA website, where we have projected a storage target for stationary energy storage in the grid at around 160 gigawatt hour by 2030. Right now, that has been already presented to the Prime Minister's office by MOP, and we do expect that target will get announced within next 2 or 3 months. But we need that type of assurity from the market side to see that stationary storage is really going to scale up. In last 2 years, India has done a lot of work on looking into manufacturing, and right now, already earlier this year, production link incentive program has selected certain companies for setting up advanced battery manufacturing in India, where majority of the initial investment, it looks like, is going to go for the EV sector. So right now, we have been working closely with Ministry of Power in looking at additional PLI for maybe 25 gigawatt hour for technologies which are particularly suitable for long duration, for stationary energy storage, including long duration energy storage. There is also additional 5 gigawatt hour tender coming out for niche ACC PLI for technologies which are in early stage of commercialization, where maybe companies will not invest into 5 gigawatt hour or larger facilities, but maybe up to 1 gigawatt hour of facilities. So there is around 25 to 30 gigawatt hour of additional incentives for setting up manufacturing for advanced battery technologies is expected to come up within next 3 to 6 months. So I think there are tremendous opportunities available, and we clearly see that on the policy side, when we are talking to agencies like Solar Energy Corporation and others, there is a very clear understanding that as we keep on increasing the renewables, we do need a mix of storage technologies, and there are certain projects which are of size of almost around 15 gigawatt-hour storage, where they have already found out what kind of a mix they need. So they may need certain amount of storage out of that 15 gigawatt-hour project as a 2-hour storage or 2 hour or less, certain maybe 2 to 4 hour, and certain could be 6 to 8 hours. So those type of analysis and work have already happened. My just one request to NREL and some of the other international agencies who try to help in this area is to please do communicate with groups like IESA and others, because many times some of the well-intended studies have had actually unintended consequences. One classic example was the Greening the Grid study which NREL did back in, I think, 2015-16. That was a time when Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has already for 2 years worked on setting up a roadmap for energy storage deployments in India, and there was a plan for setting up pilots for energy storage projects where viability gap funding could have been provided. Unfortunately, in the first phase of the study, which was done for Greening the Grid, it was done at a very high level using theoretical solar and wind output, where it was not considered the real variability in the solar and wind. And the first phase study said that, oh, storage is too costly for India, and right now it is not cost effective, and Indian grid is capable of absorbing 100 gigawatt of solar without need for energy storage. And it was explained later in the report that this was a preliminary study. It did not look into specific state level variability and other aspect. But unfortunately, the power minister ended up just picking up that one paragraph from the executive summary, and that killed the entire demonstration projects in India. So these type of aspects do happen, and again, we do welcome collaboration. I have collaborated personally with many people from NREL as well as other agencies, and these collaborations are very useful. But please, sometimes in analysis, you end up drawing a box and then do analysis within the box, but these type of collaborative projects have an impact much beyond that, and I request colleagues to please pay attention to that. So with that, I'd like to thank again MJ and all the partners for working with IESA on advancing this. So we are very confident that within this decade, we are going to make India a global hub for advanced energy storage technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. Very, very insightful. We look forward to strengthening the collaboration, and as you know, we're having new emphasis, renewing interest in working in this area between the United States and India, and we will always blame NREL for any problems. With this, we move forward. We have 2 representations from the U.S. industry players. We will start with a recorded message from Matt Harper of Invinity Energy Systems, a clean tech entrepreneur and a product developer whose career spans pioneering work commercializing electrical energy storage, wastewater treatment, hydrogen generation, and fuel cell vehicles. With this, I would ask for please to play the recorded video.
Hi there, I'm Matt Harper, Chief Commercial Officer with Invinity Energy Systems. Invinity manufactures a product called a vanadium flow battery. Vanadium flow batteries are primarily used in utility scale applications, and in particular have been used more and more in looking at longer term energy storage. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about some of those projects that we've done, some of how we see those projects come together, and then our view on some of the more interesting opportunities in the US energy storage landscape for long duration solutions. Invinity is a global company. We operate from our main engineering and manufacturing base in Vancouver, Canada, where I'm from. We've got design and manufacturing capability over in the UK, just outside of Edinburgh at Bathgate. We do a substantial portion of our balance of system manufacturing over in China. Then we have sales and corporate offices in London, the UK, and in Melbourne, Australia. Through those locations, we serve projects around the world, notably to date not in India. And we're obviously very interested in exploring opportunities in your country as part of our discussions today. Inside of vanadium flow battery is a couple of different components that are not the same as what you see in the conventional battery technology. We store our liquid electrolyte in what we call a vanadium electrolyte. It is a liquid flowing electrolyte that contains only the element vanadium. It's that liquid electrolyte where the energy is stored in the battery. That stored energy is converted into electrical power in a device that we call a cell stack, which is what converts the chemical energy into electrical energy. And then the balance of system around those core energy storage and power conversion components essentially are the things that make the battery work. We've got pumps and a liquid system to circulate the electrolyte to make sure there's enough power inside the battery at any given time. And then there are, power conversion and controls built into the battery so that it is able to function as a totally standalone, self-contained battery unit. Those individual modules are unique in that they ship 100% fully complete from our factory. They are pre-filled with electrolyte. They are fully functionally tested before we ship them. And that's how we get, some of the key performance characteristics out of these batteries. The vanadium electrolyte itself is very safe. The combination of these components together delivers a very long life, on the order of 25 years or more. The components and raw materials we put into the battery are highly sustainable, both sustainably sourced and easily recyclable. That combined with the sort of the factory built and the proven nature of the technology itself mean that this is a very economical solution. What we do with those core modules is that we install them in what we refer to our 6-pack, which is 6 of those individual modules inside a 20-foot shipping container, as you see on the right of this image. And then we deliver as many of those containers to a particular project site as are needed for a given application. So what applications do we see are most valuable? Obviously, flow batteries have long been held as a great solution for long duration storage. And that's definitely a big part of what we see in our project base and in our customer base. But we also see that because flow batteries don't degrade with cycle life, we also see that what we think of as high throughput applications are equally valuable. So projects where you're either delivering 4 to 10 hours of storage per day are a great fit for us. But similarly, projects where you're doing 5 or 10 or even more individual cycles per day are a great fit because we can cycle almost indefinitely without any degradation in performance. So it's that high throughput or long duration aspect, both of which are we can deliver very capably. And those are we're delivering that very capably today at projects around the world. What you see on this slide are some of the projects that we've delivered both in the US, in Canada, and in the UK. And all of these take advantage not only of that high throughput capability, but also that long duration characteristic. The Energy Superhub Oxford is a project we delivered with our partners at EDF Renewables to the grid in Oxford last year. This is a 5 megawatt hour battery that is cycling almost continuously on the electric grid, providing regulation services, making sure that the voltage and frequency on the electric grid in this particular region are staying within operating limits. This is the world's largest hybrid battery. There's a combination of our vanadium flow batteries and lithium batteries at site. The way that those two batteries work together is our battery is cycling almost continuously, and only when the power requirements of the site exceed a certain threshold does the lithium battery get called into play. That means not only is our battery seeing more revenue because it's generating that revenue almost continuously, but the cycle count on the lithium batteries is decreased, meaning that the wear and tear on those batteries over time is decreased and the lithium batteries will ultimately last longer. Just to touch on some of these other applications briefly, European Marine Energy Center, what we're doing here is absorbing power over a tidal cycle. So EMEC is generating tidal power and using that energy to convert into hydrogen using an electrolyzer. This is the combination of both long duration, because those tidal cycles are 4 hours or more, and high throughput, because there are 4 of those cycles per day. So we see a very, very high cycle count at this particular site, really emphasizing those two characteristics that we can deliver very capably, long duration and high throughput. Miramar and Saboba, the projects you see in the middle, are two projects that we've delivered alongside the California Energy Commission. Really what these projects are doing is proving that our batteries can, on a day-to-day basis, manage throughput from solar power generation onto commercial industrial sites, but also bringing in a long duration element, providing backup power for, for overnight periods or even multiple days in the event that these facilities are without electrical power for an extended period of time. Finally, some of the projects that we have under construction at Chapis Lake in Canada and at Yadlamalka in Australia are all focused around how do we take 6 to 10 hours worth of great solar generation from the middle of the day and deploy it into the evening when that energy is most valuable. Again, emphasizing the value that that longer duration storage can deliver to solar projects and ultimately to the electric grid that those projects serve. Thank you very much for your time today. Would happily entertain any of your questions. My contact information was here. And thank you very much for your attention.
Next up, we have our esteemed speaker, Mr. Yashwant Mahadevan from EOS Energy Storage, a U.S. player already operating in India. Given his experience, I'm sure Yashwant will have insights for us how industries can work together for advancement of battery storage solution.
Thank you, one and all, for the opportunity to present in this esteemed forum. In this short session, what I'm trying to have is key learnings which could be adopted to the Indian market basis on what's been happening in the US market. So if you look at the overall scenario today, as on, say, December 2019 or so, the cumulative capacity which was installed in US was close to around 4.5 gigawatt. And in terms of the megawatt, gigawatt hour, it was close to around 11.3 gigawatt hours. And we all know recently IRA was passed, and then it kind of accelerated this. And people are not talking about an estimates which is going to be anywhere between 80 gigawatt or 120 gigawatt. That's the kind of an estimate what there are general analysts which has been talking about. Interesting part, as on December 2020, what you could see, 75% of the installations have been a standalone battery storage. And this is one aspect. And then the second aspect, what you are seeing is 75% of these are all coming from the ancillary markets and from the ISO regions, which means there is something during the initial phase of any BESS deployment. What we are seeing is there is a lot of market-driven forces, which means batteries are scheduled to be operated scattering to the ancillary service market. And this is something which we have seen in US, we are seeing in Australia, we are seeing it in UK. So the initial phase of the battery journey is going to be predominantly through the ancillary services over here. So our key takeaway from an Indian market perspective is to have batteries to be included in the primary response. That's one thing which we would need to do. We've been great that CERC has included batteries now, energy storage systems, but of course it's in the secondary response. Our key takeaway from here is it has to move towards the primary response too. Now moving on to another very state which is pretty much closer or similar to the Indian territory is California. Let's see kind of what kind of issues are happening there, or what's the key. One of the aspects, California has around close to 34% renewable energy penetration over here. And clearly California, way back in 2013 itself, they started thinking about this, and they have started looking at storage-based targets over here. So they kind of mandated the investor-owned utilities to have targets of storage by 2020 and then by 2024 in terms of installation base. So one clear aspect which we could take away from this, from an India perspective, is we would need to have a long-term planning. You would need to start somewhere way ahead in terms if you have to return. And that's one of the progressive work which we have done through ISA is to have a vision document which was published in May which talks about 160 gigawatt hour by 2030. The second interesting aspect what we see is as the renewable penetration goes up, we are seeing the discharge duration of the battery is also going up. So that's clearly evident. In 2018, the average duration in California in the CAISO region was close to 3.5. That kind of increased to around 4 hours. And now the bids which the CAISO region is talking about is in 6 hours and even 8 hours plus. So this clearly states one aspect, more renewable penetration, more discharge duration is going to happen. And there are going to be two interesting facts apart from this. More the storage is being deployed in a particular region. This is one of the studies which has been done by NREL also, that it kind of states that more storage which is being deployed into any system, you're going to have higher duration of a battery which is going to that. And this clearly brings us down to a phase where long duration storage is going to be essential. What is long duration? Is, as Rahul said, there has been a lot of debate in terms of which hours is going to be on long duration. Today, I think we are all settling anywhere between 8 hour plus talked about the long duration, but that's something which we can debate and we can close it over here. So everyone knows when you kind of move on from what is this opportunity which is available in the long duration space, right? I would like to concentrate more on what is available from in this decade to 2030, which is essentially what we talk about as an intraday storage. Any requirement basis on say 4 hours to 12 hours. Because during this decade, that's where we are going to be basically required. The renewable penetration is going to be at that range. I don't think we are going to be at a 60%, 80% level where we are talking about a seasonal drastic storage, but we would need to start investing in those technologies now. Few estimates what we have in terms of leading organizations such as McKinsey using the Long Duration Energy Council. By 2040, they are projecting close to around 85 to 140 terawatt hour of energy capacities which is required. And if you look at kind of boil down and look at these key markets, I'm talking about US, India, Australia, and some parts of Europe. The average market size, what we are talking on an intraday space is close to around 10 billion. That's on a base case scenario. If you kind of look at an accelerated scenario, this whole opportunity kind of moves up from 10 billion to 25 billion over here. So it's a substantial opportunity even in a kind of an intraday storage place what we are looking at. But the need is clearly established. We are seeing trends in California that as the renewable energy increases, there is going to be a need of longer duration storage. But of course, there are barriers, right? That's exactly what everyone kind of have to realize. Barriers is in terms of there is no clear long-term policy. And I think these barriers do exist in most of the countries too. The second one, awareness is also not there in terms, you've seen many of the technologies which are kind of catering to the long duration storage and high cost, because lithium of course has a lot of advantage from a perspective of volume, because EV kind of contributes directly in the volume scale, so their learning rates are much faster, and these technologies have a high capital cost today because the volume is not there. So what could we do, we as an industry do? I've kind of transposed this into an S-curve. So like any product which has a kind of a creation phase and a growth phase and a maturity phase, today we can look at even long duration storage in the same way. So what could India do? India could do in a two phase, maybe it could be in a single phase too. First phase is to look at some sort of a new market development. Energy storage is one side, but we have to start looking at long duration storage from day one itself. It has to have a clear vision in terms of timeline. It needs support, it needs grants to happen. I don't think, and we would need to have PPA structures which kind of incentivize the developers to invest into long duration storage through equity, and it's going to be supported by grants or incentive. And that's where I think US-India collaboration is going to work tremendously. US is kind of a leader when you look at the R&D which has been happening in the long duration storage phase. So it's kind of through this collaboration we can take the best of the technologies and see how it's getting implemented or how it's getting suitable in the India. The second aspect, what I would say is we should start looking at capacity payments for long duration payments. So it has to be kind of incentivized through a megawatt rather than megawatt hour, because today there are very, very limited revenue streams what is available. So end of this new development or a creation phase, I would say there is enough knowledge on different technologies which are available for long duration storage. There is enough knowledge from a banker's perspective so that they are ready to fund all these projects when it comes to the growth phase. So that's the entire aim which we need to kind of look at. So that's essentially from the perspective of what we could do. These happened in offshore. We have seen UK being very successful when they did its CFD mechanism, and that's how it's kind of looked at. We are in India itself looking at green hydrogen in a very similar way, and I think that's a kind of a policy what you would need to have for long duration storage, and we should take about what is happening in, say, the other scenarios like Earthshot initiatives, which US has created for long duration storage and kind of adopt over here. So with this, what is we as EOS doing? EOS is an energy storage equipment OEM. We manufacture zinc-based electrolyte, battery OEM basically. And the aspect what we kind of engage is our solution is basically it's fully recyclable, it's non-flammable, it's non-toxic. We kind of utilize all the abundantly available materials to manufacture our product. And why long duration is, if you look at the curve, what we are able to achieve is as the discharge duration goes higher, say from 4 hours, from 6 hours to 10 hours, the temperature delta change within the module kind of reduces, which means for an 8-hour solution, we would be able to pack more energy at the same cost, and that's going to be incrementally going to value to all the developers over here. Of course, these are the new products what we have developed. Currently, we are selling our Gen 2.3. We are moving towards our Z3, which is a much more energy-packed solution over here, and we are pretty excited to be in the Indian market and demonstrate our product effectiveness over there, over here. And these are some of the projects. In total, we have done close to around 581 megawatt hour in various phases. I would say various use cases and all over the world, predominantly in US, but we are doing a couple of projects in India too. Thank you.
Thank you, Yashwant. Great work of your company and very insightful. And last but not least, I would like to invite my colleague from the U.S. Embassy who works with the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service and leads the collaboration between the U.S. and India and the commercial aspect related to energy, Ms. Dura Al-Makki, to give us some closing remarks.
Am I audible? Thank you, MJ. I would like to end by extending a big thank you to the Department of Energy for organizing this session and to all the speakers for such an informative session and sharing their perspective on long-duration battery storage. It is very evident from today's discussion that as India moves away from fossil fuels and increases its renewable energy capacity, energy storage will have a very important role to play in helping India achieve its power reliability and power security, ultimately enabling the country's decarbonization. We heard some great discussion on pumped hydro energy storage and technologies like green hydrogen or green ammonia storage, but what is of particular interest to me as a U.S. commercial service representative is that all these areas are still developing in the country, which possesses huge scope for a cooperation between the United States and India. Our team works very closely with U.S. companies to identify partners, pursue business opportunities, and help U.S. companies overcome policy-related trade barriers and other business hurdles. As a U.S. government agency that represents the commercial interests of U.S. companies in India, our focus is to help advance U.S. and India partnership, and we see many opportunities for collaboration on the energy storage sector. With that, I would like to end this technical session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to the continued engagement in the clean energy and energy storage sector. Thank you.
Are we opening Q&A? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a couple of minutes, so I think we should take one or two questions, yeah? If anybody has a question, please raise your hand. I would request the hostess to please hand them the mic. Anybody has any question, please raise your hand. Please hand them the mic.
Thanks very much. I'm Santosh Kamath from KPMG. Question to NREL. I know we talked about the different technologies, but if you have to take a bet on three, in order of likelihood of success, what would those be?
I am famously not a betting man, so.
Okay.
But right now lithium is the leader, but it's complicated because we've got transportation needs for EVs. It also depends on what duration we're talking about. If we're talking a long duration, hydrogen should come out, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And hydrogen might come out because there's a lot of other industries there. I also want to respond to something that Rahul said earlier on some of the NREL work. Storage is a complicated issue because it depends on what the targets are, and really storage comes from a policy perspective. That when we want to get to 100% decarbonization, we need energy storage then. For some of our earlier studies and some of our works, when we're looking at a lower target, you don't need energy storage then. You can rely on gas, you can rely on fossil fuels to provide your flexibility. So that is a complicated message to have here, because when we're looking at these very ambitious targets, when we're looking at 100% decarbonization, you need energy storage then. It also depends on the market, as Rahul said. So right now, there isn't a good market signal to say that storage can be profitable, because the utilization factor of storage is going to be very low. So we need massive market reform to motivate the investment in energy storage. I think, on the which technology would you take a bet on, there's a lot of flow battery innovation being done. If you look at the amount of chemistries out there, there are literally hundreds of different combinations for flow batteries that are being explored. I was working recently on a non-aqueous organic redox flow battery that had never been tested before, and we're at the bench scale with that. And really, it's going to depend on how much we invest in long duration storage, how much we invest in these myriad of technologies, but that's going to come from the market on whether we're going to invest in them and really find, what solution is going to be out there. But there isn't going to be one, there isn't going to be two, there isn't going to be three. There's going to be many solutions depending on, the environmental kind of potential. If you have caverns, if you can chase compressed air energy storage, if you're going to use oil wells for gravity storage. So it's going to be very localized. So maybe answered some of your question, but I'm not going to name specifics.
All right, sure. So flow batteries is what you think will do well.
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
it'll be one of them. It'll be one of the many.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
But just to add something, I think in terms of the narrative, I think sometimes when we combine storage with just renewables, again, renewables need storage, but storage has many other applications as well. If you see some of the first projects, like for example, AES, when they started deploying, the first project they did was they coupled storage with a coal plant in Chile. Because there was an opportunity, rather than operating coal plant at below its economic maximum and keeping certain energy in reserve just for some emergency, for synchronous reserve, they found out that by adding around, I think, 30 megawatt hour of storage, they were able to sell 30 megawatt hour of coal energy, which was the cheapest on the grid, for those many hours throughout the year, and that was economical. So I would say that when we say renewables need storage, that is fine. But to say that storage is only required for 100% renewables, I think that is a misnomer. There are many things, like for example, in all our analysis what we have done, we have seen that actually customer-sided storage is going to be much bigger than the grid-sided storage. I think in these type of conferences we get fascinated with grid-scale storage and large gigawatt-hour tenders. But at least our estimate says that on the stationary side, 70% of the market in India is on a customer side, and customers are deploying storage in form of lead-acid batteries already, because grid is not 100% reliable. And even in US, for example, just take telecom sector, US telecom sectors and data centers have more than 20 gigawatt hour of lead-acid batteries which are sold annually into that market. So there are huge amount of opportunities. The main thing what is happening is now we are looking into the scenario where RE plus storage is actually becoming a cheaper solution than anything which is available to the customer, especially in the Indian context where commercial industrial customers, and this is a separate session happening I think at 2 or 2:30 p.m. But commercial industrial customers are paying 8 rupees to 12 rupees. In fact, in some states like Maharashtra, if you are a residential customer and you are consuming more than 500 units, you have a joint family or you have a bunch of air conditioners at home, you will be paying 10 rupees or more as a residential customer. So renewables plus storage can easily beat that price point. And that's where I think what is required more is in terms of the business model, in terms of the financing solutions, rather than just waiting for reaching to 100% RE or waiting for $50 batteries. I think there are a lot of opportunities available to deploy large-scale storage right now, and it will happen. I think the way I say it sometimes in Indian context is that policymakers had a great opportunity 5 years back to accelerate storage adoption. Now we are reaching a stage where actually it's good that policymakers are moving, but they are moving too slowly. And storage deployment is going to happen. It will just get delayed by 2 years if some of the things don't happen. But right now we are no longer as dependent on policymakers as we were maybe 5 years, 10 years back.
Yeah, I think there's one other point to add there, is the market will determine what happens here. So there is an opportunity, there has always been an opportunity for storage, and that's why pumped hydro was developed in the 80s, was because there was a huge opportunity for energy storage. And as soon as the price point is right, the technology will be there. So it doesn't even have to be driven from a policy perspective, but the challenge is when it's not being driven by the energy market, when it needs to be driven by the capacity market. And that's when we're in long duration storage. And to motivate that, we need a complete market overhaul, because the economics won't work out in the energy market for long duration storage when we're at very high levels of renewables, because they won't be able to make it from arbitrage. So that's the nuance, but it is a nuanced point that's difficult to communicate. So people hear we don't need storage. It's that the economics for long duration storage are going to have to be based on capacity and not the energy market.
All right.
Good morning. My name is Deepak Sharma from Reliance Industries. So my question is to manufacturers of long duration battery storage system. Have we considered about the safeties and deployment? Because after that, the scrap disposal will be the greatest problem, as we are facing in recent scenario for mobiles and computers and electronic parts, because it's a huge headache for industries now.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
this is one of the main consideration of building our battery. So one, we choose commodities which are abundantly available. Say for example, in US, our commodities include zinc, bromine, which forms the electrolyte. Then we have titanium and graphite, and then the plastic molds. So these are commodities which are available all throughout the world. So it's easier to scale up, and it's very sustainable also. It's sustainable because it's fully recyclable. The second aspect is that since we have chosen these commodities are non-flammable. There is nothing in this whole system which could make this whole system fire up or anything like that. So you would have heard about some fire issues even last week in California, but in our kind of technologies, it's all redundant, right? Fire redundant, so there is nothing. So every aspect during the R&D stage, one, because of the scalable nature, we choose materials which are abundantly available. Two, from a safety point of view also, we choose materials which are non-flammable. That's how we look at it. Recycling, it's fully recyclable. Because if you look at, again, because it comes to the fact that what we have chosen is just the commodities, and these recycle are always available. And for our own generation 1 and generation 2 batteries, we have already recycled it with our recycler in US. So there's nothing new which we would need to invent, similar to what is happening in the lithium world over here. So that's one of the advantages. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what an excellent, knowledgeable session. Can we have a huge round of applause for our esteemed speakers? With this, we conclude our first session. And on behalf of REI, I thank each one of you for taking your precious time out and joining us here. I also thank all our esteemed speakers for joining us here. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Yeah, can we have a group picture? Our next session is powered by Bridge to India, and it will be on the technical standards for solar balance of system components.